What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Seoulweaver Podcast. I'm your host, Will Brooks, and as always, I am coming to you from right smack dab in the middle of Seoul on this Thursday evening with another episode of the Seoulweaver Show. So, I am not in full launch mode, if you haven't figured it out. I am actually just trying to get a few things worked out, get a few things lined up until I actually launch. I'm gonna go into that a little bit more later on in tonight's live broadcast. But yeah, really getting things together, trying to get things just optimized to where I can actually do this by myself. If you haven't noticed, I this is like a one man show, man. Like I go and I produce it, I come up with the content, and some of you are probably gonna say that's what it shows. It's a little bit evident that it's a one man show. But one day in the distant future, my goal is to actually get everything kind of set up and get a couple other people in here working with me to kind of get things, I don't know, to produce the show and to make it a little bit more, I don't know, like a little more polished, a little bit more less amateurish. Actually, I like the amateurish angle of it. It's just that, look at this. It's just that it's too much to do. And I mean, I need another screen, and I'm like, okay, well, if I pull up another screen, then I can actually do this and do that and do this. But I'll never look at the camera if I pull up another screen or bring one of my other monitors over here. It's just too much going on. It's more than you guys need to know. Today, I got a few things I want to talk about. We're just gonna breeze really quickly through the format and the makeup and what the podcast is intended to do and what it's going to be for. The reason I've gone through that before, I've talked about that before, but the reason I want to do that again is because today I actually shared the show further and wider than I normally do, and so there may be some newer viewers or some newer listeners that who don't really know what the intent of this is. If you're joining and you're like, "What is this?" then you're going to figure it out tonight. Then, of course, we'll go into the current events. You can see what those are in the description. And we'll talk a little bit about some social media shares. A lot of articles today that, quite honestly, I didn't read in full. I like skimmed them. This is not something that's going to happen all the time. This isn't indicative of the show. But before I get started on anything, I wanted to kind of jump on a few things that were addressed last week in chat that I couldn't really answer because my format was broken and I didn't see chat until the end of the show last week. So I've got that figured out. Another reason why I'm in prepisode mode or preparatory episode mode, because just trying to figure out trying to get some things figured out. But somebody actually asked me last week. We were talking about the trip that the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State is making to Korea, and we were talking about how I talked a little bit about how they're trying to formulate a strategy on North Korea, between South Korea and North Korea, and just trying to formulate a coherent strategy on how to handle North Korea. And someone asked in chat, in live chat at the time, what was the strategy before? And I really couldn't answer it. I don't know why. Maybe because it was on the spot, or I don't know. But I couldn't answer it last week, so I want to talk about that really briefly and just kind of explain what the strategy was before. And basically, it was just diplomacy. They used they used sanctions and a lot of rhetoric, a lot of leveraging trade and things like that to kind of control North Korea. Didn't really turn out to work really well, particularly once, I think in 2013, 14, when the Kaesong province, there was the Kaesong industrial park or whatever it was. It was this entity that was a coal joint North Korea, South Korea industrial complex that, kind of housed a little bit of business from North Korea and South Korea combined together. And I think there was a lot of South Korean businesses that employed a lot of North Korean workers, and things like that. It just made it possible, or it made it realistic for talks to happen between North and South Korea. And once that, I think that was the last thing I remember that really broke down here in South Korea between the North and the South. And like economic. To kind of sum up what I'm trying to say, it was economic policy. They tried to influence North Korea's economics to get them to come around back that time. That's what the strategy was before. I don't know what it was um, from the moment I guess President Park entered into the fray in or entered into power in South Korea. But that's around the time, maybe a little bit before. No, I think that's right around her time that the Kaesong province closed down. You had like all these breakdown of talks of family reunions and things, because of course there are families that have been split apart between North and South Korea since the Korean conflict in the 50s, and it's just been a lot. Everything's kind of broken down. And I hear all the time that there's zero talks between North Korea and South Korea these days, and that's what's really scary about it. So hopefully, when they come up with this new, I don't know, hopefully whoever's coming up with this new strategy knows what they're doing. They know know a little bit about Korea, and they know a little bit about the history and what North Korea wants. I don't know if we can actually go back to what we had before. I don't know if we'll ever get back to the point where Kaesong is open and we're doing. That's the beauty of doing a show live, man, because I get distracted with my ADD brain and start messing with stuff and then knock things down. That was my guest camera that fell over right there. Let me make sure we move that to the side. And then my new mic that fell over. Quick thing, I got an upgraded mic, and I was really excited about it. It turns out to be an upgrade in the fact that it works and it picks up everything in the room, and you can hear my computer. You're going to see this mic come back in a minute once I get all that worked out. So, yeah, that was my answer. So that's kind of like my answer to, I forgot his name, man. I can see his face in my head, but I can't remember his name. But the person who asked the question about what the plan was before, what the strategy was before, in last week's episode. Another thing I didn't do last week that I wanted to touch on, like I don't know, a loose end that wasn't tied up from last week, was I talked about events and I did not mention the Itaewon Festival. There's nothing I can do about that now. It happened last weekend. I didn't find out about it till Saturday, and I don't know how that happens. Like, I don't know how that went off my radar. So basically, me and the wife sat down, we talked about it, and we were like, "Hey, the radar's broken. Like, if we don't know about the Itaewon Festival, that is a big event, how can we say like we're sharing events with people and things like that?" So what we did was we went back and, well, we made plans to go back this weekend and revamp whatever it is whatever process we got a lot of pull as far as like going and finding information, but we need to change that to a push where information gets pushed to us and we get, I don't know, vetted information, more information than we even want. I want to get so many alerts on what's going on for the next few days or over the next weekend or the next couple of weekends that I get sick of it. And then I just have to filter through it and pick it all out. So we've got that coming. That's not in effect tonight. I still don't have that many events to talk about tonight, but it will be in effect come next week's broadcast. So with that said, let me jump into what we're going to talk about tonight. So I will, of course, start with the podcast. And again, I'm just going to go through what this is or what I want this to be and what the goal is, what the vision is of the Seoulweaver Web Show. The vision is for it to be a little cooler in here. But I'll go over that really briefly, and that'll only take like 10 minutes. And then we'll go into the current events that I have listed out here for us today. And I mean, that's to cover everything from Donald Trump's visit here to Korea to more updates on North Korea, updates on President Park that we'll talk about a little bit. And then something that was Korea won an award that was pretty cool. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And I'll jump into social media events and social media shares that caught my attention. A lot of that is the first couple of articles, or first couple of things are about business. And the last thing is about a Mike Tyson-esque brawl that took place. That is it's kind of bizarre, but it does lead to a culture that I do want to talk about, or some an aspect of life here in Korea that I wanted to share with you guys. And then we'll end up with the one event that I have, or maybe two events that I have for you today, and then we'll end the show. So let's start with what the Seoulweaver Show is, and I kind of want to kind of get this out to everybody that's going to be listening to the show, or that's curious about checking out the show. I took this format as a whole. Well, let me backtrack. So I used to run a podcast, and I consider myself still running a podcast. The Seoulweaver podcast. It was audio only, and I did it once a week. And I had I had a decent run where I had 35 episodes. They are all at seoulweaver.com if you want to head over there and check them out. I do reference some of the episodes I had in place back then, or some of the episodes that I talked about. We talked about some pretty interesting things. Like if you're in Korea and you're curious about like what to do if war with North Korea does break out, and you're not one of these people who has this mentality that nothing's gonna happen, then and you just want to be safe, you want to be sure, you want to be, cover all ends and things like that, then you can check out the last episodes, episode 35. It talks about the evacuation process in the event that particularly if you're a U.S. citizen, because I didn't know I'm from the U.S. I can't really cover what other countries' evacuation plans are, but I did go ahead and jump on the evacuation plan and give a pretty detailed explanation of what that plan is and how, like we talk about the military's evacuation plan, but even for the civilians here in Korea, there is an evacuation plan. I talk about that in episode 35. Things like that. We had some pretty decent conversations. I'm going to talk about President Park, and during that time period, I talked about the scandal, and I covered it to the best of my ability. That's actually here on the Switch as well, the Seoulweaver YouTube channel. So things like that are what I talked about. And it worked. I liked it a little bit, but toward the end, or toward the middle of the year, I didn't really feel like I was providing that much insight, or I didn't feel like I could consistently provide insight, like real life, everyday insight for expats that are here in Korea and expats that want to come to Korea. And so what I wanted to do was try to find a way to rearrange the show, or rearrange the format, and kind of let people know what's really going on over here. And I fought back and forth. I thought about it and brainstormed about it. And this is kind of what I came up with. And as a matter of fact, I stumbled across a TV show, not TV show. I stumbled across a web show, a podcast called The Majority Report. And I love the format that they had so much that I basically stole it. And if Sam Cedar ever calls me up and says, "Hey man, you owe me money," then he's absolutely right. I will owe him everything I earned from this, which is nothing. So I'll give you 99% of it. You get like 99 cents. But like the program, or the way it was delivered, really spoke to me. And I was like, I think I can provide a lot of information, a lot of insight about the way things work here in Korea, about what expat life here in Korea is like. And I could even get to the point where we take it beyond just what life is like. And, and for those who are curious about what it's like, or who just got here and want to know what they got themselves into, I can go a step further and start interviewing expats who have been here for a long time. Now, me personally, I'm not a real expat. I'll get into that next week. I'm going to talk about that. But I do live here in Seoul, and I have lived here for the vast majority of my adult life. I'm in a status that kind of makes me feel like I'm not really an expat that's over here on his own. But for those expats who are over here on their own, I want to start an interview show. And the podcast that has been up till now for the Prepisodes, it's me talking about my experiences here, which is why you'll hear about why I don't consider myself a true expat in the nature in next week's Prepisode. But it's an interview show where I kind of talk to them about their story, how they came over. A lot of people want to come over and teach English and then transition into other things. And there's a lot of people that I've met that have done so, and they've done a great job, and they've done it all artfully, and they've all done it like slightly different ways. I'll talk about a group or a startup here in Korea later on in tonight's broadcast. So you'll hear a little bit about it. But I want to get those guys on the show, interviewing either remotely or interviewing here in my home studio, because some of them I know personally. And we'll kind of give you guys their story so you can understand what like what happens when you come over here, or what's possible when you come over to Korea. There's a lot of people out there that have started their own businesses now. Things have changed so much since my first arrival here in 2001, and I kind of want to get what the new expat does when they come to Korea out to you guys. So that's kind of the point of the podcast. Beyond just telling you what expats do, I want to kind of let you know what the environment is like here in Korea, what the environment is like as far as current events are concerned, or as far as like what's going on, like keep your ear to the street and figure out what's happening here in Korea. And for that, I came up with a current event show or a current event segment. Now, this is something I came up with like maybe a year ago that I just wanted to do on YouTube by itself. But I had a really hard time getting over the fact that I don't want it to be a news show, because it's not going to be like, I'm not an investigative journalist. That's not who I am, and that's not the purpose of it. But I kind of want to give you my quick take on what's going on, just so you know what it's like. Just so you know, like, just to give you that insight on life in Korea. And since I'm doing this live, and hopefully we'll get a lot of other expats who view the show, who watch the show, and chime in on the chat, you'll get my opinion and anyone else who watches the show. That'll take some time to get it up there, to get the show to that extent or to function to that level. But eventually that's what I want to do, which is why I'm starting to share the show a lot more and start talking to people a lot more about getting on it. And as we get more people interviewing, we'll have a lot more to share, and I'll figure it out. But I want to give you that insight based on the current events that are happening here. And so now that the news is being like dominated by Trump in North Korea, I mean, it's a little depressing, but it seems like something that I have to cover, and it makes me a little uncomfortable because I don't really like pushing my opinion upon people. So you'll see that in my delivery. Like, I won't be trying to tell you like what to make of what's going on. I'll just give you what I make of what's going on after my experience of being here for 16 years, and let you kind of take that and go do your own research and see what to make of that. Like, for example, I don't know. For example, when President Park was being impeached, like, there was just millions of people, like hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know if it was millions. Maybe I think 1 million people like protesting President Park, and it was a crazy thing to see here in Korea. And I would like to kind of share things like events like that. It was unique, and that was unique in nature. But events that are happening here in Korea, the Olympics next year, I want to share that with you guys and things along those lines. So that's what I'll be doing in the current events segment. And then lastly, I guess I kind of lump these together, a social media and upcoming events segment where I talk about some social media posts, because you can get a lot of insight from social media posts. The post that actually made me come up with this plan or made me decide to share just specifically social media posts was a post of Korean people covering their nose next to black people on public transportation here in Korea. I mean, that to give you a little insight, I saw that message, or I saw that post, and I commented on it, and I said, you know what, I don't even want to comment on this. I want to kind of like cover this in detail, because you can't really do it justice just writing down what you think in a short comment on Facebook. And so I want to take posts like that. Some of them might be a little uncomfortable, but I want to take posts like that, share them with you, share my opinion of them with you, and let you know at the same time that that's not the only opinion. These are the opinions that I saw like in the comments or from other expats and things like that. And then lastly, of course, upcoming events. And I want to kind of just tell you what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. I've already told you we've got to fine tune that process to where we can really, kind of give you the real information on what's coming up. If anybody's out there listening to this and they know of a source for upcoming events, or a good source for a social media post, and a good source or people that you want to get interviewed and hear their story. For example, Megan Bowen is a good friend of ours, friend of the family's. So we're going to have her on the show eventually when we can pin her down, because she's a little busy. But we'll have her on the show to talk a little bit about what her journey was like, because she came over and taught English and then eventually transitioned into doing her own startup. And I'd love to share that story, because those are some great stories to kind of get out there to you guys and let you know that being an expat in Korea is more than just teaching English. Uh, if you happen to be an English speaker. So that's it for the podcast. Now, normally what I want to do here is cut the podcast out, edit it, and then go ahead and slide that over to Libsyn and have that audio version of the podcast be out there continuing on the Seoulweaver podcast. But I'll cut it out here and then go into the current events segment from that point on. And that won't be on a podcast. That'll only be here on YouTube. And what I'll do then from that point on, since the show is going to be pretty lengthy, it's already 20 minutes in now, I want to go ahead and slice these different current events and social events or social media posts, comments up in separate videos on YouTube. So you'll see it won't just be this long, drawn out process that it has been for the last few weeks, because I don't really want to I know people don't have the time to just sit and watch an hour and a half long stream, but the stream is going to be there for anybody who wants to join in. I know it's Thursday night. It's like ladies' night, probably a bad night to do it. Might have to move it. But I think people are out hanging out. But this is what the show is going to be, and I'm going to jump on and edit it and get some more pieces out to you guys on the weekend. So when the weekend comes, Saturday morning comes, you can kind of go through and run through some of the current events and see if you wanted to, and kind of keep up, and see what my take is. Make your own take. Share in the comments your take. Disagree with me, agree with me, either or. I mean, I want to hear more opinions than just my own, which is the main reason why I ended up discontinuing or kind of revamping the podcast. So let's go ahead and jump into the current events. And of course, part of me doesn't want to do this. Actually, let me go ahead and clean this up. Great thing about producing your own show, you get to do stuff like this on the fly. I'm doing this in OBS Studio. Like, I'm going to go into detail about how this is set up. I think this is amazing that we can just do stuff like this. So let's go ahead. Of course, Trump is the main. I mean, Trump is he's a monster when it comes to like media. Gets good ratings. He gets good ratings. But so Trump is to make a 2-day visit to Korea, 2-day state visit. It says this is a first state visit in 25 years, which kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. I was like, I know Obama came over here while he was president. I know Bush came over here while he was president. Clinton came over here while they were president. But I guess it was a stop by Korea while they were on their tour of Asia. Maybe that's is that what the difference was? I don't know. But Trump is, Trump is going to make his way here in November time frame, which is actually, I know I've got my opinions about Trump, but at the very least, if you're going to be threatening nuclear war with North Korea, come by the country that is in danger of being destroyed, or come see Seoul, because that's really what the threat is. We're a little worried that if you do a preemptive strike on North Korea, they'll just use their ridiculous plethora of artillery and decimate Seoul. And not only do I love Seoul, I live in Seoul. So I'm very invested in Seoul not being shelled by an obscene amount of North Korean artillery. And people seem to misunderstand. North Korea has old artillery, but they have old technology. Well, old technology still kills people. It still works. They got so much of it that they could just, they don't need to have a nuclear bomb launched at Seoul. They can just blanket Seoul in artillery, and that's the real worry. So it is, I know I'm going to regret this, but it is a little bit relieving to see not only Trump coming over here, but I just covered it last week that the Deputy Department of State is going to be coming over here as well. So it's comforting, a little bit comforting, not extremely comforting, but it's a little bit, nerve relaxing, I guess. It's a little bit, it makes me, I get a nice little warm and fuzzy to see that at the very, very least, they're coming over to see what's going on, or to kind of see what's happening and see firsthand what the situation is on the ground. Um, I can't knock that. Now, what he does when he gets over here, will probably no. We'll see what happens. Let's not jinx it. So it's pretty. I don't know what to say. First state visit in 25 years. Like that's since George H.W. Bush. So I'm actually happy. This is the first time I've been happy to see Trump really going somewhere, because it's like, cool, maybe he'll get on site, see what's here, and say, oh, I see why this is such a big deal, because there's 10 million people living here in Seoul, and we don't want to get it like destroyed. And it looks like they're going to be rolling out the red carpet for him. It's pretty. I don't know if I am comfortable with the dynamic or the rapport between President Trump and President Moon. I hope he can relay to him the importance of the issue, but I guess that really doesn't matter. That really doesn't come down to President Moon. Well, I guess it does come down to President Moon. It's his country. I don't know. I got mixed feelings about this whole visit thing. I will say one thing about the Trump administration that really has me worried. There's a lot of expats that will tell you, like, nothing's going to happen. It's been 50 years, nothing has happened. I don't have that take. That take is not I'm not so confident in that take. Strictly because things are different. I mean, there's things that are happening now that have not happened in the past. North Korea wasn't so close to a nuclear weapon in the past. So to say that it's just going to be the same thing it always was, that's not something that I'm willing to say. Another thing that really catches my attention as a veteran of the U.S. Army and someone who's been in and around the Army since I was 19 years old, the idea, there's this mentality among the congressmen in the U.S. that they work for Trump. And that's crazy. It's like, what are you talking about? I saw a congressman say it about Devin Nunes. Well, he works for the president. No, he doesn't. He's Congress. It doesn't go president, Congress, Senate, Congress in the House. It doesn't go that way. So it's crazy to see congressmen actually U.S. congressmen failing to identify or see that distinction. Now, I do agree that because of Trump's popularity, they are in danger of being, like, quote unquote fired, because he can actually get somebody to replace them when it's time to get voted out. But that's a whole different story. Well, I will point out the people who do work for Trump are the military people. And I actually saw an article where they were talking to retired General Mattis about his take on North Korea. And in the end, Mattis was basically saying, like, hey, man, if Congress says attack, we're the military, we attack. If the president says attack, we go forward. If all these blocks are checked, that's what we do. And being a former military guy myself, I'm like, he's right. Like, that's what, like, if they make the call to attack North Korea, then the military is going to do whatever it is they can on their side to make that happen. And they're not gonna push back about it. And that's what's crazy, to see the news and the media talking about, these generals making this plan to tackle Donald Trump if he tries to go for the nuclear football. It's crazy. They have been working for the president, whether they agree with him or not, for the last 40, 50 years. Those guys, they are institutionalized. They do what the president says, whether they agree with it or not. And it's got to be something huge for them not to agree with him. So that being said, it's like, well, okay, well, Congress still isn't going to make that call. But Mattis pointed out something else. He said, we don't have an infinite amount of time to deal with North Korea. We can't just we just can't let them roam out forever. And I mean, I think that's a realistic idea. And this is not Lindsey Graham. This is not these guys talking about we've got to attack North Korea and have millions of people die over there. This is just a calculating decision or a calculating result or resolution. It's just this guy. He's being honest. He doesn't think we have an infinite amount of time. And do we really? I don't know. I think Kim Jong-un is the whole regime is interested in self-preservation, and this whole pursuance of a nuclear weapon is based on that self-preservation, like not to actually use it, because that's not how they preserve themselves. If they use it, then the U.S. just nukes the hell out of them, or they bomb the hell out of them. So that's not something that's a good. That's not how you preserve your leadership, to go poke the giant bear that you've been saying is a giant bear this entire time. So I don't know what's gonna end up happening. I don't have the same take as these expats who say that nothing's ever gonna happen. That just sounds a little extreme to me. Speaking of nuclear weapons, speaking of nuclear war, this is, I forgot who this is. This is Kim In Rong. He's North Korea's deputy ambassador to the UN, and his take, he's saying that nuclear war may break out at any moment. This has been North Korea's rhetoric for a long time. It hasn't been nuclear war all this time, but North Korea's, they've declared war, even in a war that has never really technically stopped before, but they've reiterated that they are at war with South Korea and the U.S., primarily the U.S., for the last 2 years, off and on. So their rhetoric has always been big. It's always been a little overblown, but these days it's strange to see the U.S. kind of matching that rhetoric, and I don't know what we can do about that. We just kind of have to watch it ride out. I don't know if I don't believe we've hit the point of no return. Here's one thing I'll say about in defense of the people, of those expats who do tell you like nothing's going to happen. We have been we have been at a different place than this. Like, the rhetoric has never been this high on both sides, or this extreme on both sides, but we have been at the point where people, like soldiers, have died. There's been actual exchange of fire across the DMZ or across the border of North Korea and South Korea, and those instances still didn't lead to war. So I think that's why you hear a lot of expats say, especially ones that have been here for a really long time, you hear a lot of them say like nothing's going to happen. But you will also hear them say like it's never been exactly like this before. I hope nothing happens. I don't see North Korea ever launching a nuke at South Korea. This kind of defeats the purpose. They really want to come down here and take over. To go a little bit further into South Korea. So I mentioned this earlier in the broadcast that President Park, former President Park, this is the woman who was president of Korea before Moon Jae-in, President Moon. And if you are unaware, I don't know how you'd be unaware, but she was ousted as president non-violently through protests that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But now she's going through her trial because of corruption charges. And in short, what happened was she had a confidant that she was longtime friends with, who was kind of exploiting President Park's position to extract money and wealth and favors and everything else out of these big conglomerates, these companies, and anybody she could think of here in Korea. And the claim is that President Park knew all this was going on. Now, President Park maintains that she didn't know. She was betrayed by somebody she had a lot of faith in. And there is a significant portion, maybe 25%, maybe 30% of the population who still support President Park. But it's kind of a surprise to see. It's a surprise to see that happening, because the country, the vast majority of the country, really wanted to see her removed from power. So now she's going through this trial, and it's been lengthy. It's been brutal. And now she's saying she's finally coming out. She hasn't said much since her trial started. And she's saying she's come out and made a statement now that the trial is political revenge. I don't know enough about the political environment in Korea. I will say this: we as expatriates, depending on our status here, we're just outsiders looking in. Now, there are some people who actually migrated to Korea who probably had the right to vote and things like that, and the right to kind of get involved with politics. But we who are here on work visas, or just on this temporary status, we can't really get involved with the politics. That doesn't stop some people from getting out there and participating in rallies and things like that. But I think if you look at your visa, technically if you're here just teaching English, you can get booted out for going and participating in politics. But it doesn't stop us from like looking on and seeing what's going on. And what's happening with President Park or former President Park is it political revenge? So I guess what she's saying is the opposite. Now that she's been taken out of power, the opposite party is now in power, and they're using their influence to make her trial a little bit, be it longer, or give her. She's saying they're using their influence to create an unfair trial. It's crazy because I think that's what, not President Park herself, but I think that's what happened to President No Mu-young. They kind of, he was part of the Progressive Party, and then the Conservative Party got into power, and they just basically used that power to kind of smear him as bad as they could, and he ended up committing suicide. And so it's the second president that has met a pretty rough fate. Well, not second. In modern times, I guess, since the assassination of her father, Korean leaders got it rough sometimes. What you see down here so that's President Park in the upper left-hand corner. What you see down here in the bottom right-hand corner is one of her lawyers trying to show so they say President Park is trying to get international sympathy. This is one of her defending attorneys trying to show what the average space that a prisoner gets to sleep on. And so he's laying on newspapers that are the same amount of space that the average prisoner gets to go to sleep on. And that's he's making an attempt to gain sympathy, because you can't, but he's trying to say you can't do that to your former president. This is the article that I skimmed through, so I don't know exactly what his claim was. I'll chime back in on this next week, but they're trying to, and this happens a lot everywhere, I guess. This happens a lot in the world, where people say, you can't do this to a person of stature. Like, you can't do this to a former president. You can't do this to a rich person. You can only do this to like the common folk. This is what everybody gets in jail. So what's the big deal? I don't know. President Park might not go to jail. I think I can't say that. I don't know what the political environment is, but if it's trial by popular opinion, or trial by what the masses think, which kind of was the end of her presidency in the first place, she might end up locked up. I doubt they'll put her in anything like this she won't be sleeping on no newspaper-sized pallet, though. So on to the next thing. Speaking of President Park, and speaking of the thing that took her from power, Korea actually won a global prize. I think this is the German global prize, a humanitarian prize, for their candlelight rallies, which got President Park impeached. And if you weren't here at the time, during that time, we talked about it a little bit back in the podcast, but there were like millions of people in downtown, in Seoul City Hall, protesting President Park. And it was pretty impressive, because you had that many people in one place, and you had very minimal violence from even people on the other side. Like, I think there were a few skirmishes and a few fights outbreaking, but for the most part, it was a lot of people in one place and very, very non-violent. And so what they've been awarded here is a prize, or the German prize for humanitarian prize, for a peaceful resolution to a corruption scandal. That was pretty awesome. I think Korea really they kind of set the stage for open democracy, or they kind of set like this democracy works, the power of the people works. And I think that's what that prize is for. So they gave it to like 700 million Koreans were awarded this given this award. Don't have it written down. So last week I talked a little bit about China. And if you haven't been following what's going on with China and Korea relations, they're pretty bad, because since the United States deployed this weapon called THAAD. This is a terminally high altitude something. This anti air defense or this ground to air defense. It's a system that's supposed to shoot down missiles. China was livid when Korea deployed this thing because obviously, if they can shoot down missiles from North Korea, they can shoot down missiles from China. And then China also claimed that this weapon is used to monitor what's going on. So the U.S. is now using THAAD deployed in South Korea under the guise of monitoring North Korea. They're now using it to monitor China. That's the claim. I'm not going to get into whether or not that's the case or not, because one, I don't know, and no one does, but everybody will claim it. But last week, now, China reacted to this in a major way. They put a ban on travel, on tourism to South Korea. There used to be a lot of Chinese tourism to South Korea. If you've ever been in Myeongdong or anything like that, and you realize you can identify or separate, differentiate Korean and Chinese, you realize you hear a lot of Chinese in Myeongdong and different parts of Seoul because there's just so much tourism. Well, China actually put a ban on tourism to South Korea. They put the squeeze on South Korean companies that are operating in China, and I mean a ton of other things. Like some of it like silly, some of it just they ban Chinese or they ban Korean dramas in China. Some of it strikes me as silly as as an American who doesn't pay attention to things like that, but that was obviously a big deal, and so the Chinese government actually banned the viewing of Korean dramas, which is crazy, and just a bunch of other things. They just really brutal reactions to the deployment of THAAD, THAAD. But and I even reported last week, I don't want to use that word. I even talked last week about China telling like South Korean tourists that they have to leave China, although they did say that was under the guise of or under the risk of being abducted by North Korean uh, operatives. So now, what was also happening last week is China was threatening not to renew this currency exchange with South Korea, and the businesses in China were having a hard time dealing with this. They were having some real backlash to what was going on with this, and the deadline had actually passed. Like there was no sign of China actually going ahead and doing this, renewing this currency deal, but they did it 3 days after the deadline. And so some people are saying, hey, maybe this means like the worst is over with China. Like the North Korean, or excuse me, Korean Chinese relations might be on the mend, and maybe things will get back to normal. Um, I hope so. A good friend of mine is going to China. He's Korean. He's going to China, I think, in next month or something like that. And I said, hey, man, be careful over there. I don't want you to get abducted or anything like that. But it's pretty rough to see the difference between what happens, to see Korea kind of taking the blunt for U.S. foreign policy. It kind of puts me as a person who loves being in Korea and being from the U.S. Puts me in a bit of a pickle, I guess. I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, I don't have any effect on U.S. foreign policy. Moving on to the next topic. So right now we're gonna jump into social media upcoming events. Let me go ahead and take a quick break, get some water. I'm sweating here. I'll be back in a quick moment with the social media and upcoming events. Stay tuned. Okay, we are back. I am back. I have a real tendency to like act like there's more than just me here, just because that was the intent in the first place. Um, so one thing I want to do for the social media and upcoming events post, I don't want to be so. I mean, not that the rest of the show is formal, but I want to get like super informal with social media events and upcoming or social media posts and upcoming events. Just want to like, I might even I just want to chill and talk about the stuff that I'm seeing on here. And probably between now, I've opened the window too because it's a little hot. And I live by a busy street. They're going to be honking the horns like crazy. Um, but one thing I want to do is in fact, let me drop this off real quick. Um, Probably the current events portion and the social media events portion are just going to be I mean, we're just going to be hanging out, man. Like, I'm not going to even, no, I'm not even going to sweat it. Like, I'm going to like, I got me a cup of wine and some water. Got the door open, got the window open so it can cool down in here. I'm just going to relax and kind of just hang out when it comes to these portions or these parts. So let's go ahead and jump into social media. So I had actually had a lot of articles that caught my attention on social media this week, and I started saving them since the broadcast of last week. One of them is Philip Morris talking about the tipping point for combustible cigarettes in Korea and Japan. I, man, I hate this company with a passion. Philip Morris, and so actually, I hate the company with a passion. But let me kind of put this out there: the reason I've always hated them because they peddle cigarettes and they're terrible for people. But I saw a John Oliver a special on Philip Morris on last week tonight with John Oliver, and it was just almost blatantly, it was just so bad, it was just so disgusting what this company has done in other parts of the world once the US decided that they weren't going to let them just run free with their peddling their methods of peddling tobacco and like disease and cancer to the vast majority or to a significant portion of the population in the US. They just went and started doing it elsewhere, started doing it everywhere else. And then like watching Philip Morris like sue countries and try to like strong arm countries who are trying to protect their own citizens, it was just put them like at the bottom of the barrel to me. Now, the reason I say in full disclosure is because that's not research that I did. That's research from a television show that, it claims that everything they're talking about is true. But I don't know. I didn't do the research myself, so I don't know what Philip Morris done. I don't know, maybe they're a good company and maybe all that stuff on Last Week Tonight is made up or embellished. But even if it's only a fraction of what they were talking about, it's still a horrible company. But there is what do I want to say? Like, I'm not happy about this because I think they should, I think everybody should try to stop smoking and try to live as long as they can. But, I mean, I'm a former smoker. I gave smoking up. I hated it. I hated the smell. I hated walking around smoking. I felt like a jerk, like fanning smoke in people's face as I was walking down the street. Just did not want, just am not a fan of cigarettes and a company like Philip Morris that peddles them so aggressively that, they actually try to bankrupt countries, maybe not bankrupt countries, but they try to sue companies and scare company or countries into selling their product. And that's what I really hate about it. But they are going to come up with, it sounds like he's talking about coming up with smokeless cigarettes, like smokeless tobacco, these little devices that where you can get your nicotine fix without smoke. And goodness gracious, that would be, I mean, it wouldn't be good because people would still be getting, I don't know, whatever it is that they're getting from cigarettes, or that, they'll still be getting the negative effects from cigarettes. But I mean, the culture in Asia, especially not really Korea and Japan, I mean, it's bad. There's a lot of people smoke in Korea, and it's a really upsetting habit. And if you meet like the rude people, they just smoke anywhere. So I find myself walking through smoke or trying to like fan smoke out of my kid's face in a lot of cases where, or in a lot of, more than I want to, more than I think is appropriate. But, because I guess appropriate's never. But it's worse in other countries. Like I've seen like I think like it's worse in poorer countries, developing countries where they're still trying to like develop the health codes and things like that. And you can still smoke anywhere, and there's still no real limit on smoking. You see like kids smoking, chain smoking, and things like that. It's just freaking. It's just a horrible, horrible thing. So seeing this really caught my attention. It's funny though. The smoking culture in Korea is pretty unique because a lot of people smoke. And it's grown a lot more common. I think has it grown a lot more common? There was this stigma that women didn't smoke. So if you were a young lady, you would hide and smoke in Korea. Like you'd go around a corner where nobody could see you and you'd smoke your cigarette. Now that culture is changing, but at the same time, Korean culture is changing to the point where they blur smoking on TV now. Like when the cigarette goes to somebody's lips, they blur it out. They have like the picture, like the infected lungs on the smoking on cigarette cartons now, which I would not be able to smoke if I had to look at that every time I took a cigarette out. And one of the most chilling, oh God, that's what I meant to find. One of the most chilling commercials I ever seen in my life was like if I was still smoking when this commercial came out, it's got a person walking into the store buying cigarettes, and it's got like their double or them in the background choking and dying to death, or dying and choking to death on cigarette smoke in like this case that's just full of cigarette smoke. That's maybe it's because I wasn't smoking when that commercial came out, but that one right there was just like, oh God, that's a rough commercial. So I think I hate smoking. That's all I got. That's what prompted me. That's really what I wanted to talk about. The strangeness of smoking culture here in Korea, because it's kind of like strict but loose in a way. Moving on from a company that I kind of hate to a company that I think I'm gonna love. This is a story about a company called Buzzville, and it's basically a story about startups in Korea. And I mentioned this before when I was talking about Megan Bowen, aka Chono Minguk Saram, the YouTuber here in Korea who came over teaching English and eventually transitioned into kind of owning her own startup. Like like maybe 3 years ago, there was this visa going around that was designed for companies like this. And I bet these guys actually took advantage of this. I'm going to see if I can get a hold of them and get them on the show and kind of talk to them about Buzzville and their startup. But they employ a lot of people, and they employ a lot of foreigners, a lot of Koreans, and their startup company is kind of taken off. What's their actual product? I knew it before I started this. Too many articles, man. Oh, it's an actual interview. Hey, check this out. And I actually have the link in the description. It's a written interview with the owners, Teddy and Max, the owners of the company. One of them's from the U.S., one of them's from France, and they got together and did this startup. It's pretty cool the way people can kind of get over here and do this. Was not possible before. Maybe if it was possible, it was different before. And now you see a lot of foreign-owned businesses here in Korea. Not a lot, but you're starting to see them emerge. And so you see people not just owning restaurants and or like services and things like that, but like actual startups and actual tech companies. And it's pretty cool what's going on and the way things are changing here in Korea. I would love to find somebody who can actually talk about that startup visa and what you need to do and how you need to go ahead and get that there. I know there was a guy named Vil from Vil Vlogs who used to be here. We were actually on a podcast together on Korea FM, and I think he had a coffee shop app, something like that. He has, however, since left Korea, but I think he had that visa or something along that line. He was working on getting that visa. think Megan has this visa too. We should get her on to talk about it. If you guys happen to know of anybody that knows a little bit about visas, about the startup visa, feel free to leave it in the comments. Let us know. If you yourself know a little bit about it and are comfortable coming on the show talking about it, please do, because I'd love to share this with people, particularly those in the States who want to come over here but are working on something and feel like it's impossible to come over here and work on that same thing. Did I word that right? Who feel like it's impossible to both work on their dream and come to Korea. There's a lot of people that are just doing stuff that they love here now, not just teaching English, and I really want to drive that point home. That's going to be the point of the show, particularly the podcast, over the next 6 months, I think. Next. This is a weird headline. There's no picture. It says, thug accused of biting off friend's ear in a bar brawl. And basically, these guys got in a fight in a bar. I'm kind of wasted, but he bit off another man's ear. The man whose ear was bitten off also prosecuted for assaulting the other man with a liquor bottle. Whoa, I didn't even catch that part. So the dude who got his ear bit off, there's like this no-fault mentality in Korea. Like there's no instance in when no one's at fault. And this is why I have this actual article here. The mentality about or towards fighting in Korea is like they just charge you both, and whoever gets hurt the most ends up like being like compensated for the most in a fight. So you see here, the man got his bit off, but he got his ear bit off, but he still got charged. Was it bit off or just bitten? I don't know if it was really, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but he must have hit the dude. He must have hit the guy with a liquor bottle and a guy, Mike Tyson, his ear. Pretty crazy. Because of this mentality or because of this stance on fighting, I have seen fights escalate to a point and de-escalate from that point, from points that would not be capable in the States. Like if a fight had escalated or a confrontation had escalated to the point that it does here in Korea sometimes, that I've seen it escalate, there is no like backing down or just going home or just, cussing each other out and walking off in different directions. Like a fight has to happen at some point. And maybe that's because I haven't been in the States since I was 19, or maybe it's because of, the way people reacted to one another where I come from. But I've never seen people get in each other's face and yell and smash each other's stuff and never hit each other like I do here in Korea. It's pretty crazy. And I think it's like that. It's kind of like that Chris Rock mentality where guns should be legal. You can get guns all you want, but bullets should cost $10,000 a pop because nobody would ever use one. And I mean, that's a joke. That's probably a little, not too soon after Las Vegas in the States. But yeah, like if it's expensive to do something, you tend not to do it. You tend to consider it, unless you're in this drunken state that these two are in. You tend to consider it before you do it. And so I remember seeing somebody say they had to pay like $14,000 for smacking somebody out in the subway. Like, how hard did you hit them? $14,000, maybe $1,400. I can't remember, but it was a lot of money. Oh, yeah, 14 million won. That's like $14,000. That can't be right. I gotta double check stuff like that before I go into it. So yeah, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because if you happen to be a foreigner from the U.S. or from places where like you throw blows and you kind of pick each other up and dust each other off and you go on your separate ways, that does not happen in Korea. That's not the case. Like once the police get involved, you come out the pocket. Don't fight here. It's terrible. That's my point. Because I meet people. You run into, especially younger people, like younger guys, you run into people who are just like, we just throw hands and be done with it. That's not the way it works over here. And that needs to be conveyed to people, particularly soldiers that come over here and just don't realize what the culture is like. You find out the hard way. Thank God I knew before the first confrontation I got into. And then the last thing for today, it's a really crappy little display right there. I had that. Why did I have that so weird? Wink win in Korea is throwing a Halloween party, and it's a Halloween reunion. I don't know much about it. It looks like there's 20 people going, 20 people reserved for, or who have checked going on Facebook. The link will be in the description. Be sure to check that out. Halloween is pretty awesome in Seoul, particularly in, Halloween is pretty awesome in Yongsan-gu, because if you look at Haebangchang, there's like areas where foreigners hang out. Haebangchang, Gyeonggi-don, and Itaewon. By the time, like, the way foreigners dress up for Halloween, the way they react to Halloween, the way they celebrate Halloween, it is like bonkers. And you see people out in pretty crazy costumes having a great time. And then like the local nationals, like Koreans, will go out to Itaewon to just kind of see what's going on, because people will be in some pretty crazy costumes. I remember my buddy Chad he's like this 6'2", 240-pound dude, and he was dressed up in a French maid costume in the middle of Itaewon. And he got stopped for pictures so much that he's a real nice guy. He was like, hey, I'll take pictures with anybody. But at some point in time, he had to like cut them all off and say, guys, I gotta go. I've been here for an hour taking pictures with random strangers. And I mean, the costumes are it's just that intricate, because people really do like to celebrate Halloween here in Korea. So the foreign community really likes to celebrate Halloween. So if you are around, if you're there, this will not be the only party going on Halloween. There'll be a ton of them. I'll go ahead and share those as I come across them in the Seoulweavers Facebook group. Speaking of which, if you're not a member of the Seoulweavers Facebook group, feel free to join us over there. Just search for Seoulweavers on Facebook. Go ahead and give us a like on the Seoulweaver Facebook page. That is Seoulweaver with no S. Seoulweavers is the group. I will be posting things in there. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. In fact, let me go ahead and drop down. You'll notice that on my host cam, or on my camera right here, you'll see the social media links pop in there. So it's at Seoulweaver on everything. And let us know what you thought about the show. Let us know what you think about the premise. Let me know what I should change, because I'm not religious about anything other makeup. Like, if you want to troll me and say like change everything, just stop, I'm going to ignore you. But be funny with it. I'll still laugh. But yeah, I'm gonna put this together, fine tune a lot of this, get it figured out how exactly we can go back and improve things. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. And yeah, I'll see you guys in next week's episode. So just before I jump off, let me make sure no one is on chat asking any questions, because I sure failed to do that last time. I really got to figure out a way to manage this a little bit better. I will see you guys for next week's episode. Don't forget to join me at 8 o'clock Seoul or Korea Standard Time, 8 p.m. on Thursday night. I'll be talking a little bit about why I say I'm not a real expat. I didn't often say that. I never said that before I started meeting expats at like YouTube events and at other things that are going on, at other events I started going to in the last couple of years. Just like, you know what? I'm not really a real expat. I'll talk to you next week about why. So I'm going to get up out of here. Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate your time. Appreciate your comments. Please let me know, again, what you think about the premise, about the show, and about what improvements we can make in the comments section. I am going to be jumping out of here in a minute. I am actually just looking for my outro music because I don't know where it is. I'm going to go ahead and play it real quick. Yeah. Going to be making a lot of changes, guys. We'll see you next week at the Seoulweaver Show, Seoulweaver Web Show. Join you then.